Hi folks, this is Grim Perspectives, I'm Grim. Today we're gonna talk about Arcane Backgrounds. What's Arcane Backgrounds? Well, it's what makes a Savage Worlds campaign magical. Without it, it would be pretty dull and more or less like history. But we want to do a fantasy campaign. In matter of fact, we're at the moment planning a Diablo-style campaign. And Diablo, if you haven't noticed, has magic in it. Oh, spoiler alert? No. Well, anyway, magic, cool stuff. So, Arcane Backgrounds in Savage Worlds are the different approaches that there are to using magic. We had a video, last video we did on the Diablo campaign was about how magic works in the Diablo universe. So, we talked about this, and there were several different forms of magic. And Savage Worlds gives you more than one approach to handle magic. It has different arcane backgrounds, and they differ in some slight statistics and things that might happen when you cast a spell. But before we look at those, we might need to look at how spellcasting actually works in Savage Worlds. So, let's take a look. You want to cast a spell. Casting a spell in Savage Worlds is called using a power. To use a power, you first roll your spellcasting skill. That spellcasting skill is not named spellcasting skill because that would be, well, kind of lame. But it has a name according to its arcane background. So there might be magic, or there might be psionics, or whatever. We are gonna take a look in this video to and see if we can make necromancy work in our campaign. So we are gonna create an arcane background that has the spellcasting skill named Necromancy. So reroll a spellcasting skill. We pay the power point cost of our power. Power points are like mana in Diablo, so it fits really well with our aesthetics and gameplay and style of the game. We already have something like mana, it's just in the Savage Worlds rule is called power points. So we pay the power point cost of our power. If we roll really badly on our spellcasting skill, we might have some real problems here because, well, if you, it differs from Arcane Background to Arcane Background, but if you rolled 1 on your spellcasting skill, weird shit might happen. It might just be some minor inconvenience, but well, depending on what arcane background you have, it might be really bad for your character, like permanently bad. So, don't roll badly when casting a spell. Spellcasting might be dangerous. So, spellcasting skill roll, paying the power point cost, potential critical failure. Yeah, the power takes effect now, so whatever you wanted to achieve, blast something with fire, now shit gets blasted with fire. And after that, it might be that we need to sustain a spell. There are spells that continue to work after you've cast them, like I buff myself so that I'm more tough and durable. That might be needed, I might need to sustain that spell, which means there might be ongoing costs, ongoing power point costs for that spell. It might hinder my further spell casting, and if I get damaged or my concentration somehow, goes out of the window, then I might lose that sustained spell. Okay, so that's how using a power works. Now let's take a look at arcane backgrounds that we have in the Savage Worlds rules. So we have magic, we have miracles, we have psionics, we have superpowers, and we have weird science in the main setting. So, some of those seem to fit things that we want to do in our Diablo campaign. Like, we have magic here, and that seems to be a pretty good fit if we have a character class in Diablo that was called a wizard, and we had arcane magic. So that might be a good fit. We have miracles, and in the last video we discussed that there is divinely inspired magic. So miracles might work for that. And there's other stuff here, like psionics, superpowers, and weird science, which, well, doesn't ring a bell so far, right? And we have stuff we'd like to get into our campaign. Last time we talked about necromancy and stuff like that, which doesn't seem to be on that list and might need us to, well, create a different arcane background. So how do those arcane backgrounds differ from each other? We're not gonna go into full detail and look at every one of those in like crazy amount of detail. We're gonna approach it like we want to create an arcane background. What are the two? So as I mentioned before, we want to create Necromancy as a background for our campaign because it's different enough from each of those arcane backgrounds in the main rules that it warrants making your own arcane background. It shouldn't be the same arcane background the wizard uses because it's dangerous, and maybe dangerous in a different way than arcane background magic. So it might be useful to take a look at the existing arcane backgrounds and see in which ways they differ so that we know which tools we do have to create our arcane background. And what they differ in is their spellcasting skill. Miracles, for example, has the spellcasting skill Faith, and Psionics has the spellcasting skill Psionics. Well, is that just a name? Yes, it's one thing, it's the name, and the other thing is they are linked to different attributes. Faith is linked to Spirit and Psionics is linked to Smarts. So you have a good tool here to decide which stats, which attributes should be prioritized for users of a certain arcane background. The starting power points, so how much mana you have, might be different for the arcane backgrounds as well, as might be the number of starting powers. So you might start with 3 powers and you might start with 1. If that seems like weird and crazy unfair to you, it all balances out in the end, more or less. You just have to keep an eye on it, and all those things that might vary are useful tools to create an arcane background. The powers, the specific powers that you are allowed to take as a member of an arcane background might be limited. So in your campaign, whatever you're creating, healing magic might be limited to the arcane background miracles. That's something that would make sense for a Diablo campaign as well, I think. So you might limit certain powers to certain arcane backgrounds. What also differs is what happens if you roll really badly. So 1 on your skill die or 1 on your skill and wild die. And if bad things happen, they can have, well, different effects relating to your arcane background. It might just be that you are shaken and momentarily out of it, but it might also be that you temporarily lose access to your spellcasting abilities. Or if you look at the setting rules for different settings in Savage Worlds, it might even be more devastating than that. It might be you take damage, you take permanent negative character traits. It might be really bad for you if you roll badly on that skill roll, and that makes using magic dangerous. And if you remember, last time we talked about how magic in the Diablo universe works. We talked about that we want our magic to be dangerous, because in the Diablo universe, as I see it, there is no power without cost. It's always a bargain. And if you happen to, get the bad deal because you rolled badly, there might be bad things happening to your character. There is another way to further customize the arcane backgrounds, and that is to make specific edges that are only available if you have a certain arcane background. As an example, in the core rules there is an edge called Wizard, which can only be taken by users with the arcane background magic, and it has the potential of making your powers cost less power points, which is a neat thing if you want to cast a lot. But it is only available to those users with the Arcane Background magic. And that's another great way to distinguish your Arcane Background from others, because you can not only customize powers, but you can also customize further stats and how your user can use magic by just making it an edge. There might also be specialized rules for your Arcane Background. Weird Science is a candidate here that has a lot of specialized rules in the core rules, and we'll take a look if we need those, but we might be able to just make it fit with what we have up until now. So, since we already talked about the theme of Necromancy, where it draws its power from, and how we would like magic to be in Diablo, we can just, take a quick step at creating a Necromancy Arcane Background. We need a spellcasting skill, and we'll call it Necromancy, and it will be linked to smarts. So here you can decide, is it linked to spirits or linked to smarts? Well, spirits are highly sane characters. They are grounded and based in this realm. They are witty rather than book smart. And Necromancy might have the tendency to attract practitioners that are not that sane. And it shouldn't necessarily be a drawback for them using their magic, so I linked it to smarts. Starting power points. Necromancer didn't have any more or less power points, relatively speaking, or mana, relatively speaking, to other casters, so I don't see the necessity to start with something else than a standard 10 power points. We want our Necromancers to do quite a lot of stuff. We want them to summon undead minions or golems. We want them to attack enemies with direct damage things like poison and bone themed and blood themed powers. So it might make sense to design it that way that the character can start with 3 powers, so he can cover all those areas. Now we come to the interesting parts. Which powers do we need to give the Arcane Background so that it works? We have a power called Zombie, which raises zombies from dead, corpses. And that fits pretty well to the summon skeleton thing that we expect from our Necromancer. We have a summon ally power, which summons. As a novice, you have really the opportunity to summon a construct, which works pretty well because we want to use it to summon our golem, which is not the same as raising a zombie from a corpse, so we need a different power for that. For curses, we have the power lower trait, which enables us to lessen an enemy's skill. So we take the power lower trait. A quick side note on that, the power in the core rules is actually boost / lower trait and enables us to do both. Here we only can take the lower trait part of it, which means we are taking some power away from this class here by restricting it in that way. And we keep an eye out that we don't restrict it too much or give it something back in return. So we are starting with 3 powers. We have a limited selection of spells that might balance out in the end. But it is an act of balancing that we are doing here. And we are trying to keep with our theme here. We cannot reliably buff stuff as Necromancer. We are much better at making everyone feel miserable. And that's how it should be. And for our direct damage, we have the choice between Bolt and Blast. That's a very short list of spells. It's just what I came up with going through the gameplay of the Diablo franchise. But it might be very well suitable for Necromancer to have other powers. As an example, since Diablo only really knew hit points and monsters that are alive or dead, and they might be debuffed in some way, but there are many mechanics that can be done in Savage Worlds, which were not present in the Diablo franchise. So there are powers out there that do crazy stuff that might be good for Necromancer, like talking with dead. That would be cool, but since it didn't fit into the gameplay of Diablo, you will not be able to find it there. But it might be a cool power, so I just added that other powers might be added in accordance with your game master. And a quick side note on that as well, I think it's always a good thing to have some wiggle room as a GM to not take the stuff you made up too seriously. If it makes for a cooler character concept and your character or your player comes to you and says, I would like this and that power or ability or whatever, if it's cool and if it doesn't break the game, why not? So, well, if a player comes to you and says, I want to divine answers from the dead, I talk to the spirits in the nether realms and I want to know what's going on, that might be a cool power, and it would be good if we could make that happen for our player, I think. So, powers allowed, short list, but we can add others with feedback from our players. So, what do we still need? Well, the results of critical failure. Things could go horribly wrong when, well, contacting the nether realms to do crazy shit with the spirits of the dead. If we roll a 1 on our skill die, we might lose sanity and we might be marked in some way. So we might have white streaks in our hair. We might have eyes of an unnatural color. But it's just something that sets us apart. It's not really that bad. Loss of sanity might be worse. How does loss of sanity work? I would advise using the sanity rules. We'll do a separate video on the sanity rules. But I want necromancers to get more and more unhinged the more they use their powers, especially if bad shit happens. And if snake eyes are rolled, so you roll a 1 on your wild die and on your skill die, you might even be possessed by a vengeful spirit of the dead. And the mark you get, so the physical thing that is left on your character, like the white streaks, the pale skin, look at the concept art of the necromancer. He looks kind of weird, right? That's probably the result of spellcasting, if you think about it. So he might get a penalty to charisma if he casts badly. Okay, so that's a pretty good start, right? We got nearly everything covered to facilitate the playstyle of necromancer we want. That looks pretty good. Some small things that we still need to figure out. Like I talked to you about the summon ally skill, which lets us summon our golem. That's a power you need to sustain. Sustaining means it costs power points for every round it stays up. That's one thing, one problem. Other problem is you need to sustain it, which gives you a penalty of -1 to your spellcasting. And from the gameplay, we expect our necromancer to have the golem just at his side and cast more or less unhindered. Because if you have to sustain that spell and it gives you a big penalty, and -1 doesn't seem like much, but it really hinders your casting if you want to cast like Bone Spear, Corpse Explosion, that stuff you know from the games, that it really hampers your style. And we might want to take a look at that power and see if we can make it work. Maybe we'll build an edge, maybe we'll do a separate trapping that allows us to get rid of the sustaining part. And the other thing I want to get in there is Corpse Explosion. Because, yeah, we have powers that do damage in an area, like the Blast power. But Corpse Explosion was like my favorite power in Diablo. It let you, there's a corpse, now it explodes and everything is covered in gore and takes crazy amount of damage. And there's not really a power like that. And that's not a big problem, because normally powers don't exactly fit what you want to do. You have trappings for that, to custom fit them to do very specific things. But there isn't a trapping for using a corpse as improvised explosive device. So we might need to make a trapping for that. And we'll do that in a further video. And I'm really looking forward to that. Apart from those issues, I think we got it more or less covered. If you like the video, hit like. If you want to stay up to date on what we are doing next, then hit subscribe. And if you know someone who might be interested in the stuff we're doing, then send them a link. Send them over here to us and help the small community we've got here grow. That's really important to me, because at the moment we are like 30 subscribers or something, and there is comments under some of the videos which I try to respond to and try to incorporate into the videos we do. We've done Necromancy here because one of our subscribers, one of you guys, asked about how a Necromancer would work. So I thought it would be cool to take it as an example to create an Arcane background here. And if there's so few of us that there's nearly no communication going on, no discussion in the threads, then, well, we're missing something, and I'd like to be there to be more live in the YouTube channel. So if you know someone who might be interested, or you might know a good forum or place to share the stuff I do on this channel, then let me know. I would be really interesting. I would be really interested in knowing your ideas to make the channel grow. And yeah, we did something cool. We created our own content today, and so until next time, I hope you can create something that really scares the fuck out of your players.